Okay, sorry, these screens are still okay. We're good, Taylor? All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this May 16th meeting of the Public Infrastructure Committee. My name is Tony Emerson, representing District 4, and I have the privilege of being the chair this year. And if my two cohorts would introduce themselves, please.
Michelle Hofer, District 9.
Neil Dobler, District 7.
All right, we have a lot of staff over here on the other side. So first agenda item is to approve the minutes from our March 30th meeting. I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes 3-0. The next item is the Pavement Condition Index, or PCI update. And Mr. Copley?
Thank you. So the Pavement Condition Index, or the PCI, is one of the tools that we use in terms of selecting streets for treatment as well as for selecting the appropriate treatment measure. Literally, pavement management has transformed over the last 2 decades. It used to always be worst first.
Taylor, can you turn it up at all? Sorry.
The fans,
Sorry, Braxton.
a little hard to hear.
Oh, that helps. Sorry.
So pavement management used to always be worst first, full depth reconstruction. And as we have progressed and have refined that, we now realize that it is far more cost effective to keep the good streets good rather than do full depth reconstruction. To quantify that for you, full depth reconstruction per lane mile is about $1.5 million. Mill and over per lane mile is about $250,000. Microsurfacing and crack sealing is about $50,000. So in terms of where you are on the scale, if you're 70 or better, that street is a good candidate for crack sealing and microsurfacing. If you have a PCI in the 50 to 60 range, that's a good candidate for mill and overlay, because likely you don't have to do a lot of really expensive full depth base repair. Once you get PCI 40 or below, really it's full depth reconstruction. And so in 2019 was the last time that we had done the PCI index of all of our streets. And last year, 2022, gave us an opportunity to drive them all, and we've just gotten the results, and we're in the process of getting those uploaded back to the website. So, oh, sorry, Taylor. Just to quantify, PCI range of 86 to 100 we consider very good. PCI 71 to 85, good. Fair, 56 to 70. 41 to 55 is poor, and 0 to 40 would be very poor. The overall network comparison between 2019 and 2022, our PCI moved from a 61.8 average to a 67.7. When you dive into that, where the biggest changes were is that we were able to increase our good streets in our inventory by 14%, and we were able to reduce our poor streets by 13%. And those are the ones that are the real movers in terms of what helped us to leverage that PCI up. We also did this. We also did our alleys, and the overall comparison of alleys. Next slide. Is that we had a slight increase from 56.25 to 60.51. And when we've been going right in the $500,000 range, which allows us to do about 3 alleys in the course of a year. An alley is about $175,000 if we don't have to get into the utilities. And so where we moved the needle a little bit was we increased by 6% our very good alleys, and we decreased the poor and very poor by 5% and 4%. And really what that's showing is the alleys that we went in and did we got up to that good condition, and we took the alleys off of the very poor condition. And with that, I'll gladly stand for any questions about PCI or pavement management.
I guess, Mr. Coffey, first of all, thank you for the report, and it's overall great news. I want to say when we first adopted the PCI process, I don't remember what our target was, but I don't know if it was maybe a 65 or something at the time. I forget what the goal was, but great work. I did have a question on the alleys. Those are paved alleys, correct? Not the gravel alleys, right?
Correct, and our policy is that we are not adding to our paved alley inventory. If you have a paved alley, then that would be a possibility for replacement of that. Again, we have nearly 100 paved alleys that have a condition of 2. Staff has developed their own assessment of alleys, taking into consideration a number of factors, including whether businesses are served by that, whether people are parking off of it, underground utilities, et cetera, et cetera. And again, we have 100 alleys that are a rating of 2, which is the lowest. We don't have any that are 1. And so obviously it's very difficult as to how you make a selection when you're only doing 3 to 4 alleys per year. Gravel alleys, we take care of those through the street maintenance department that goes in and does grading and then adds additional surfacing, whether that's aggregate or millings, to get the alley. And we're not adding to our inventory of paved alleys.
Thank you. Question, Deputy Mayor or Councilwoman? All right. So no action, that's just a report, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you for that. And our next item is to discuss the improvement of Auburn Road and the intersection of Auburn and 29th with the roundabout. So, City Manager?
Correct. That would be me again. In your packet, you have a memo that I prepared for you to basically explain what the issue is here. When the annexation of the parcel for the new Washburn Rural Middle School came up, the planning department and myself decided and agreed that it would make all the sense in the world to only annex to the right-of-way line on the north side of the street of 29th Street and the east side of Auburn, because the county is responsible for all of the maintenance along 29th Street in Auburn. What happened was the annexation legal description was written to the center line of those roads, which is the section lines. So we now are the owner, as it were, of half of 29th Street on the south side of the new Washburn site, as well as on the west side as well. So the county is in the process of designing major improvements from K4 Highway down to 29th Street on Auburn Road that would be to a urban 3-lane profile with 10-foot sidewalk on one side, 5-foot sidewalk on the other, curb and gutter, and also improvement of by a roundabout at the intersection of 29th and Auburn. The estimated project cost, including the roundabout at the entrance of the Washburn Rural Middle School, is a total of 6.5. The Auburn Road alone is 5.5 million. The ask that the county has made to us is $1 million to participate in the cost of that, which I believe is, I think we're getting off easy, to be perfectly honest. I am exploring the option of being able to use citywide half-cent sales tax to pay for our portion of the $1 million cost of this improvement. In discussions with legal, the issue is, what is the estimated cost of the replacement of the existing pavement that is there on our half of Auburn Road from K4 down to 29th Street? The county is working with their consultant to come up with a cost estimate for that. If it pans out that the cost of the replacement is $1 million, then we can get by using citywide half-cent sales tax without having to do additional GO or some alternate funding source. And so that is the path that we are proceeding on. And with that, I'll gladly stand for any questions about improvements to our half of Auburn Road.
Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Don't know who this is a question for, but we erroneously annexed half a street on both 29th and also on Auburn Road. What would be the process to de-annex that?
That would be a great question for the legal department. I do not know the answer off the top of my head for how you unannex something.
If you can do something, seems like you ought to be able to undo it.
We can. There's the ability to do that. I'm not sure we've ever gone through that process, but certainly we can work with legal to get that lined out.
Just maybe if we could get an answer to the question. I don't know if politically it's the right thing to do. The county was moving forward with a project on Auburn Road, so they had the funding identified for that project prior to all of this happening.
I know that they have applied for a KDOT grant and that this project is planned to be done early in 2025. So I don't know, that'd be a good, fair question for the County Public Works Director in terms of funding source and where that fits in their priorities.
And if I could ask one more question, and again, I don't know if you can answer this or not. Ultimately, it's the city limits on the east side, and there's what appears to be developable property on the west side, but I'm not totally sure. That one, the biggest tract on the west side of Auburn Road, is it a farm? I mean, can it develop in the future, I guess is the question. Is it gonna make sense for us to own a road if we can't do anything on the other side of it ultimately? Rhetorical question. And really the same thing on the south side. I don't know what annexation opportunities live south of there, and I know we're not being asked to contribute to that part of the project, but I think if ultimately all the property on that side is going to stay in the county, then I think it's highly appropriate that the county continues to maintain that. Since both sides of the street pay county taxes, am I correct?
Correct.
That would seem appropriate. So that's my comments. I guess just a couple of clarifications, if you could, at the appropriate time on what the process would be and really whether annexation is possible to the west. Thank you.
And also had a little history. I know that we had originally annexed the Dillon store there at 29th, on the south side of 29th, and your issue, this predates any of it. Well, maybe not you being here, but, and we de-annexed that under court order.
I believe that was by operation of law that they found that the annexation attempt to annex a property within the Sherwood Improvement District was not legal.
Yeah, so it's always frustrating because there's a lot of stuff out there we'd like to annex, but we're not able to annex. But if it's something tax exempt for a school, we get annexed. So anyway, so Mr. Copley, is this just for advisement right now?
Correct.
Okay. Councilwoman, okay.
I'm good.
All right, well, thank you for that. And next up, we have an item from the firm program. And Mr. City Manager?
Jason?
So just to give you an update, we recently had a failure of one of our... Thank you. We recently had a failure of some air conditioning systems that took place at the City Hall in the municipal court area. So as you're aware, we had previously requested funding for a large-scale project to upgrade the HVAC at City Hall and TPAC, which would include municipal court. 6 of those systems were approved, however 4 were not. These would be 2 of the systems that were not approved. So what's happened is we've done the immediate repairs to get the areas back under a climate-controlled environment. So you should be comfortable tonight at the council meeting. However, as we know, whenever you're replacing systems like this, the lead time is very long, and we do not feel that those systems are going to be in a good condition for much longer. So our ask would be that we would be bringing forward an amendment to the 2024 CIP to add those systems to the HVAC project in order to replace those systems in conjunction with the other HVAC work within the building.
Okay, questions for Mr. Tryon? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, just a curiosity question. How old are these units?
So the actual condensing units, there are 3 in question. They were replaced between 2006 and 2011, according to the assessment. However, some of the fan coil units that are involved with them go back to the 70s. And they are currently working off of refrigerant. What we would be recommending is bringing them into using a chilled water system so they could be tied into the overall building HVAC system.
Very good, thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Tryon, guess I just had a question on the cost here. When they were originally in our packet back earlier this year, it was $1,490,000 for the second floor, and now it's $1,560,000, but the other one stayed the same. Is there a reason for that $70,000?
So what happened is we were presented with 2 options. One was for a roof-mounted unit, and one was for one that would be mounted inside the building. We had initially thought that the roof-mounted unit, which is about $70,000 less expensive, would be sufficient. However, we've recently got a ruling from the State Historical Preservation Organization that if the unit is visible from the ground, it is not something that they would consider appropriate given the historic status of the building. So we are now recommending an internal unit which would be housed within the building, not sitting on top of the roof.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. What does it mean that, is there something, credits or something at stake here?
The tax credits associated with the project would be at stake. And in this particular situation, the roof there is above the municipal court area, which you can see from the ground, and especially right behind where the TPAC signage is. So it is something that would be visible if you were looking at TPAC from ground level. There's other areas of the building where roof-mounted units have been acceptable because we've been able to put them far enough back from the roof line that they're not visible from the ground.
And I guess, how much are these tax credits that are at risk here?
So the tax credits are depending, it's obviously a legal process to get tax credits, but you can apply for tax credits up to a certain percentage of the work done. The existing project is a $19 million project, so jeopardizing those tax credits could be in the neighborhood of millions of dollars.
For clarification, when we initially submitted the City Hall and TPAC as a tax or a historic building, we have been accumulating work since then, so items such as the stairs and some of the other renovations that we've done to our City Hall side would be included. So we're estimating, based on current market, it's a little bit light, but around $5 million by the time the holistic project is done, that we will be able to apply and potentially receive and sellable tax credits.
Okay, thank you. Councilwoman, go ahead.
Can someone please explain the tax credits to me? I haven't had to deal with that before.
Rochelle's not on right now, so Rochelle Matthews is really the best person on this one. But short version is, it'd be similar to municipal bonds. We're just able to sell those back out, which offers some tax incentives for those that are acquiring them. And so it's, depending on the market, we think there's as much as $5 million at risk here.
Okay.
I can get you a better explanation on the process.
I'm good. Do we need to?
And Mr. Tryon, is this something you need some action on today, or?
What we would do, Chair, is assuming that this committee is in agreement, we would add this to the 2024 CIP. So we would bring that up as an amendment to what you've already been presented with. Assuming that we get the approval of the entire CIP package, we would go ahead and start the process of getting this ordered. Time is obviously of concern, given the extended lead time on these units.
Sure. Yeah, I guess, I mean, to me, there's not much discretion here. I mean, this is something we pretty much need to do, in my opinion at least. Any comments on that from the members?
I'll move that we add it to the CIP.
Do you need a motion from us, or guess it in motion seconded, I guess?
We'll forward it as a recommendation of the committee.
Okay. Yeah,
I appreciate that. Thank you.
sure. Okay, the next item is the JEDO and approval process presentation. Mr. City Manager?
You want to handle it or you want me to? Okay.
You want to talk about JEDO, cost?
So we'll kind of tag team on this. So the starting point is, back in 2016, we amassed a number of projects that were eligible for the JEDO funding. And this would be the countywide half-cent sales tax. At that time, project cost estimates were put together. As part of this CIP, we have gone in and taken a hard look at all of the cost estimates that we had. Some of them had literally been passed along year after year after year at the exact same cost that was originally estimated back in 2015, 2016 for the attachment to the interlocal agreement. The most recent one would be the 17th Street project, where we updated all of those project costs from the 2016 costs. And so Deputy Mayor Dobler had asked at the last city council meeting that we put together a list of the projects that we have, the project status of those, as well as the updated cost estimates, and most importantly, a projection of revenues in terms of where we would come out. So finance put together low, medium, and high countywide half-cent sales tax estimates, which are the top three portions of the spreadsheet that we handed out earlier. And you can see that based on the estimated project costs and the revenue stream, that based on the lower end of the spectrum in terms of countywide half-cent sales tax, we were about $30 million short of what we could fund. Even on the average or middle of the road cost estimates, we are about $13 million below what we can fund. And it would only be if we have exceedingly generous receipts from the countywide half-cent sales tax would be able to, at this tick of the clock, pay for the projects that were identified as part of the interlocal agreement for the JEDO. Now, obviously, the policy to the interlocal agreement does give the JEDO the ability to make changes to that schedule depending on what the revenue stream is, et cetera. And so, in a nutshell, I see a couple of options. One would be pray for the best in terms of revenue stream, and that we don't see another unprecedented 25% increase in project costs over the next 2 years like we did over the last 2 years. Second option would be identify a project or projects to be eliminated from construction. Third option would be come back in and change the scope of projects to reduce the project costs. So for example, Huntoon, if I were to just give you a high level, and I'm talking about the Huntoon project in the central part of town, which would be Gage to Harrison. If we just went in and did mill and overlay on that project, you're looking at about approximately $2 million just for the mill and overlay. That doesn't include areas where you'd have to do panel replacement, full depth repairs, curb and gutter, address storm sewer issues, et cetera. But Council Member Spencer signaled out this project last week at the council meeting that the budget was almost $20 million for Huntoon. So certainly there are options, trade-offs in terms of complete streets items, which most of the JEDO projects that we've done, we've made those recommendations. You've got the complete streets resolution that was adopted by the governing body back in 2009. So there are some trade-offs there. Obviously, policy questions for the governing body as to, do you eliminate a project, or do you change the scale of projects to be able to accomplish the projects that you've done, maybe just not on the same scale that was originally contemplated. And Steve, Freddie, any?
No, that's a great summary. I think that $13 million number, Freddie, that's kind of what we're thinking is probably that sweet spot that we need to target, either for scope reduction or elimination. 13. Yeah.
Mr. Copley, is there I guess, and maybe this is back, I don't know where it's figured in here, but is there inflation built into each of these, like ongoing inflation built into these, or is this right now, if you had to build it tomorrow, what do you think it would cost?
I believe that we built in some minimal level of inflation ongoing. I want to say 2 to 3%, Mark? 3% in terms of project cost. And I'll defer to Freddie and his team in terms of
The revenue side.
revenue.
So for the revenue side, we decided to follow a quite simple econometrics model, which is an autoregressive integrated moving average model. So in this one, we're dealing with uncertainties. So that's what we have most likely, which is your average, but you also have an upper and a lower boundaries. So most likely, within almost 95% chance, we are expecting to have revenues between those numbers. But that also does not include something as drastic as to, inflation changing 20, 25%.
Sure, I guess on my thought, though, inflation will also increase the sales tax receipts as well, correct?
That to some extent, yes, but at the same time, with other economic issues that we're dealing with at the federal level, we're dealing with issues in the bond market, and bonds right now are considered the safest investment. So when that's also considered a benchmark. So if the U.S. default, then you would expect to see that benchmark increase, which will increase the likelihood for all other debt to go up as well. And that also has an effect on consumer behavior, consumer spending. So while prices can go up, we could see a marginal temporary increase in the overall net sales, but over time, people will probably adjust their spending, and we could see overall a decrease, especially if unemployment goes up.
We've been seeing inflation outpacing revenue gains. So we're dropping.
The project costs are rising faster than our receipts.
That's correct.
Okay. Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Construction inflation is different, and
Yes.
it's still 16, 17%.
Right.
Good for the contract. No, it's just the cost of materials and everything else so that also skews the curve there a little bit. Couple of just quick questions, because I don't remember this. Bikeways, pavement management, zoo. Well, let me do bikeways and zoo first. Those are set numbers, correct? So the zoo gets 10 million, they can take care of their 4 projects or not, depending on what they want to do. Bikeways master plan, 3.5 million, set number.
Yes. Correct, sir. That is a set number. I believe that it's funded every 2 to 3 years. I want to say it's 500,000, and I think in this current CIP, we have that in as well.
Okay. Pavement management, I don't remember those projects. What, 2018, 2019, what is that?
Obviously, that was way before my time in Public
Right.
Works. I believe that decision was made at the governing body level to go ahead and fund some portion of the pavement management program by certain projects out of the JEDO countywide half-cent sales tax. I think that there was partially it was improvements to 29th Street on the south side of the new Klossman's new development out there at 29th and Fairlawn. I think that was one of those that was listed on the countywide half-cent sales tax as a project, but also mirrored a project in the pavement management program that needed to
Okay.
be approved by the governing body, right? To partner, leverage, and partner with that developer to make those improvements.
But those two are done or almost done, correct?
Correct.
All right. So kind of a moot issue at this point. I guess my next question is, who determined the original priority? I know it was actually in the interlocal agreement in this order. Assume it was Public Works or somebody at that point in time.
I don't know.
This is a question you can't answer, but we should answer at some point. If you went back and prioritized the projects, would it look the same?
Generally, it would. There's going to be a slide tonight at the city council meeting that actually has the priority on there, taken right from that interlocal agreement. Generally, I would say that they were pretty good in terms of logically where those fell in place. Obviously, there's decisions been made to push 17th Street out, and we've got the luxury of doing that because it was milled and overlaid 5 years ago, so it gives us 5 more years in terms of figuring out what that ultimately is going to look like. But probably the next one that I would do would be Huntoon, and that's one that we would have next year. We would plan to go out and start the public engagement on that one. But that would be just a quick look at it. Ultimately, it's a policy decision for the governing body, right? In terms of what projects get prioritized.
I wonder at what point we take a look at all of these projects and determine, based on your original comment about we could mill and overlay and maybe do new curb and gutter and have a nice looking street again that's functional for another 10 years plus. But we've got to understand the cost of doing that and how that would reprioritize this list. Assume that probably after discussion in the CIP, that'll be the direction, and doesn't have to be accomplished overnight. That's something we can look at over the next year, probably. Thank you. Thanks, Jerry.
Yeah, Councilman, I think you have I think the next JEDO meeting is September. I think we could probably draft something up prior to that session.
I guess just, since the question was kind of brought up, I guess my opinion, and I think what I hear from constituents is they'd rather see more streets touched and done and fewer of these than a few hugely elaborate projects where you're, having a neighborhood torn up for, 2 years at a time. For the 20 million that we're talking about for Huntoon, I mean, how many miles of mill and overlay could we do for that? A lot. And that's what really moves the needle, I think, on the PCI as well, because the PCI really doesn't get moved by, you added a 10-foot walks. And I realize there are some quality of life things that these enhancements add, but these projects have just gotten so complex, and frankly, you limit the amount of bidders then on them because of the complexity and the headaches that it creates in constructing them for not only the public but the contractors as well. These are not easy projects. I mean, yet if you went and talked to the contractor who did 12th Street, they wish they wouldn't have gotten the job. So, anyway, just my 2 cents worth. Councilwoman, anything?
Okay, my question would be, before the September meeting, when we get a chance to look at this, can we get the PCI on all of the future and upcoming projects? And like Huntoon, what kind of shape are the water lines, the sewer lines? Do they have spots that actually have to be fixed? I know on 17th, there's one area that's in bad shape for underground utilities. So I'm trying to think the viability of, are there parts like Huntoon, if we just do so much, there's bad water line in this section, we fix that, and then do mill and overlay on the rest? Is it possible to find some of those things out?
Certainly, Public Works will put together average PCI for all of these projects.
I know you got the one for Topeka Boulevard between 15th and 21st, and it was bad.
Yes,
And I know that it needs to have some significant water work done at 21st and Topeka Boulevard, I believe.
correct.
So I understand that, but some of the others I'm not as familiar with. So any extra information would help.
Certainly, we'll reach out to utilities to get input in terms of water or sewer along each of these projects, and we will put together an average PCI for you on the street projects.
Thank you.
Okay, I believe on this item, we also had another
That's right.
Yes.
presentation.
All right. So, Chair, this is the last time that the governing body, we had a meeting. We discussed a potential change for the approval process for projects. So on this slide, it shows the current status is approval 1 and approval 2, and we would like to add approval step number 3. So in the first approval, the governing body approves the CIP, which is year 4 to 10. The next approval process, it's for the CIB, which is year 1 and 2. So at that point, the project moved from idea, long-term plan to the CIB, to year 1 to 3, where we need to find a funding source, and the budget gets a little updated, and we have a better idea on the scope. So for approval process number 3, which is an addition to the current process, this one we will bring the project back to governing body for final approval if the project has a change in budget, if the project has a cost of $250,000. It would cost $250,000, a total cost for the project. If we'd have, let me take a, I apologize, let me take a step back. The third approval process will be the final approval process for the governing body to take. If we identify additional criteria for the project to have. One will be the project budget would have a significant increase, or if the cost of the project would be more than $250,000. So this would bring an extra step for governing body to feel more comfortable that they have a good understanding on each project, and we would consider additional costs and additional scope projects. So it would give you an extra layer of security that you fully understand all of these projects, as the CAP book is quite extensive.
Freddie, can I just
Please.
add, for clarification, prior to the third approval, which is basically approval of a individual project having a cost of more than $250,000, we would perform the design. So we would get the project design, get a good cost estimate, and come to you with that cost estimate to ask for your approval, again, for any project over $250,000. If subsequent to that approval, there was a change in scope or a change in price that would cause us to exceed that, we would have to come back first to the governing body to get their approval to get that amended. So Any project over 250,000 prior to going out for construction, get council approval. If subsequent to that, there's a change in scope, unknown conditions that would cause an increase, we would not have the authority to engage that additional scope until we get council approval of the increased project budget.
Yeah, thanks for putting this together. I think I've stated publicly a couple times that I'm in favor of this. We have essentially been approving project budgets for certain projects, including half-cent sales tax, I believe, street sales tax, and some other projects for 2 or 3 years, and that seemingly has worked pretty well. This would bring really the rest of the larger projects, over $250,000 into that fold, and I think it makes a lot of sense. I like the process that's been laid out here. I think a little bit about in the past, the way this has worked. You know, you get a project approved for $2 million. You at that point you haven't bid it yet or whatever. You got a pretty good cost estimate. Maybe it bids for under the $2 million, but then you get some things happen and change orders happen and whatnot. I don't know that the council necessarily wants to see those projects come back unless it's just a huge increase. So I think one thing to think about perhaps is working in a 10%, you know, if the project during construction goes over by less than 10% of the approved project budget, you don't need to bring it back. Because we don't need to see, you know, it goes over by $5 and you got to bring the thing back. That doesn't make any sense. I don't know what everybody else thinks of that.
No, I think it makes a lot of sense.
So Deputy Mayor, Chair, if I could, I might ask for 15 as opposed to 10, just given our current cost inflation scenarios. I think we're going to see a lot of stuff at that 10 number. So I think we had the discretion, 12 and a half, 15. I think that might limit some of the back and forth.
Sure, go ahead, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, but I think what the Deputy Mayor was talking about, you're talking about once the council's approved it, it goes out, it would have to be bid underneath the approved budget, or it'd have to come back. You're talking about during construction itself.
Yeah.
Like a change order wouldn't need approved by the governing body, even if it exceeds the project budget, I think. Is that, Deputy Mayor, what you're saying? So, yeah, and I think a lot of these projects have a 10% contingency built into them already, I think. I know some of them do that we've been looking at in the CIP.
Correct. The general rule is a 10% contingency.
So, the only thing I would add, and I too, I second what the Deputy Mayor said, I like this. It also brings more visibility. You know, sometimes the first time we know about a project is starting in our districts is we get invited to the, you know, to the pre-con or a neighborhood meeting or something, and you kind of forget, you know, something 3 or 4 years in the future, you kind of forget about it. So I think it brings a lot more visibility to these projects as well. The one thing I would question is, and I know obviously this isn't like a detailed thing you gave us here, so maybe this is already, you've already thought about this, it's not shown here. In the past, we've had problems with right-of-way acquisition impacting project timelines. Is your thought that the right-of-way acquisition would be in the approval step 2? It would be part of the design?
Typically, no. Typically, we would want to get it designed, get it in front of you, because if you decide that it exceeds the scope of what you want, I don't want to have already been out there acquiring right-of-way, right?
Sure, and that makes total sense. So from a timing aspect then, you know, several years ago we set a policy, and I don't know if it's still a policy or not, of these 3-year windows. The first year would be design and right-of-way acquisition. The second year would be utility relocation. Then the third year would be the beginning of construction. And if it was a 2-season thing, it'd be a 4-year process versus a 3-year. But is your thought then you would do a year or something of design? They would bring it to us, and then there would be So you're talking about really then a couple of years still ahead of the project then, correct? To allow
Right.
for time for right-of-way and
So,
utilities?
so if year one is design, at the end of year one, you would go in front of the governing body, get their approval of that project budget, put it out to bid. Year two would be right-of-way acquisition as well as relocation of franchise utilities, right? So take advantage of both of those going on. And then year three would be commencement of construction.
Okay, okay. That works. Any other questions, or was there more for the presentation? Sorry.
There's
Go ahead.
just one more slide, and that one would just show a summary sheet of the previous budget, the current budget, any changes in cost, any changes in scope. This sheet would just summarize the whole project and all the changes.
So this is an example of what the,
Summary sheet would look like, yes, sir.
and it'd be on the agenda then, probably the consent agenda, I take it?
I think depending on what the variance is, it would either be consent or we would add it as a line item.
Any other questions on this? I think it's a great change, so thank you for bringing that up. I believe that is the last scheduled item we had on our agenda. Are there any other items anyone needs to discuss? All right, well, seeing no further business, we are adjourned. Thanks, everyone.